Welcome to this quiet space, right here at the very end of your long and heavy day. You have carried so much invisible weight, holding your breath against the quiet pressure of a life that feels entirely placed on pause. Right now, I invite you to take a deeply slow, intentional breath in, drawing the cool, still air deeply into your tired lungs, and as you exhale, let out a soft, long sigh, giving your physical body full permission to finally surrender to gravity. Allow the mattress beneath you to completely support your weight, feeling the comforting, gentle embrace of the blankets wrapping around you like a protective shield. There is absolutely nothing left for you to figure out tonight. No complicated puzzles to solve, and nowhere else you are required to be. Bring your gentle, loving awareness to the physical tension you have been holding tightly in your body. Notice the quiet stiffness that naturally comes from spending far too much time confined within the exact same walls. Pay attention to the tight grip you might be holding in your jaw, which is a silent, physical record of all your unspoken frustrations and deeply delayed hopes. With immense kindness toward yourself, allow your jaw to soften and drop, parting your lips just a little bit to release the aching strain. Let that incredibly soothing wave of relaxation travel down into your neck and softly across your collarbones, melting away the rigid bands of stress you have been carrying for weeks. Feel your shoulders, which have been unconsciously drawn up defensively against the quietness of your home, finally sink deeply and heavily into the soft pillows beneath you. I know the profound, incredibly unique exhaustion that comes from staring at the exact same four walls, hour after lonely hour. You might feel a deeply restless, kinetic energy trapped right inside your bones. It is the agonizing, quiet friction of a soul that desperately wants to run forward but finds every single door inexplicably closed and locked. It is incredibly draining to stay perfectly, physically still while your anxious mind races 1,000 miles an hour, constantly searching for a hidden way out of this holding pattern. You have watched the sun rise and set through the exact same window, quietly listening to the muffled sounds of the world carrying on outside without you. Please know that God intimately sees the hidden tears of your frustration, and He does not judge you for feeling so weary, so restless, and so entirely tired of simply waiting. In the deep, dark silence of the night, when the house settles into complete stillness, the loudest sound is very often the echo of your own anxious, racing questions. You stare up at the ceiling in the quiet dark and ask the Lord in a tired, broken whisper, "Why am I still here? And when will it finally be my turn to step out into the open?" You wonder if you have somehow made a terrible mistake, if you have been completely sidelined by heaven, or if your life is somehow destined to permanently stall. That overwhelming feeling of being trapped indoors, isolated from your true purpose and community, is an incredibly heavy burden to carry alone in the dark. But I want to remind your deeply weary heart tonight that the Lord of the universe is sitting right beside you in this very room. He is actively listening to every single one of your unspoken fears, and He promises to wrap your tired, questioning mind in His perfect, unshakable peace. Right now, we are going to gently and beautifully shift how you deeply view this physical space. We are mentally transforming your bedroom from a perceived place of painful confinement into a profoundly holy, fiercely protected sanctuary. Imagine the soft, warm, golden light of the Holy Spirit gently filling every dark corner of your room, instantly chasing away the cold, heavy shadows of your isolation. See these four familiar walls not as a cage meant to hold you back, but as heavily guarded, loving shields erected by God Himself to fiercely protect your fragile spirit. The Lord has intentionally and purposefully sealed the door of this room, not to lock you away from good things, but to grant you the most profound, undisturbed rest possible. You do not have to fight to escape this space tonight, because tonight, this quiet room is your divine refuge, completely secured by the loving Creator of the universe. As you rest so securely in this warm sanctuary, begin to consciously release your heavy, exhausting tether to the frantic, breathless pace of the world outside. Breathe in the deep, sustaining, completely unhurried grace of God, pulling it all the way down into your stomach. And as you slowly exhale, forcefully breathe out the burning, toxic urgency that constantly and aggressively tells you to hurry up. Modern life demands a relentless rhythm of constant motion, constant visible progress, and endless deafening noise, leaving you feeling incredibly guilty for simply standing still. But your Heavenly Father operates in the gentle, deliberate, unhurried rhythm of ancient seasons, and right now, He is calling you to match the slow, steady heartbeat of His divine timing. Let the painful illusion of the human race simply fall away from your weary mind, like a heavy, soaking wet winter coat slipping off your tired shoulders and crashing onto the floor. It is so incredibly, deeply painful to look through the glowing digital windows of our screens and watch the highly curated highlight reels of others. You see the people around you effortlessly advancing, building their dreams, and loudly celebrating their victories while you remain entirely hidden and unseen at home. Those glowing screens in the palms of our hands have a terrible way of whispering cruel, isolating lies directly into our vulnerable hearts. They tell you that because you are stationary right now, you are falling terribly, permanently behind everyone else. The fear of missing out and the sheer cold panic of a severely delayed timeline are heavy, jagged stones you have been painfully carrying in your chest for far too long. Gently take those rough stones, the fear of being forever forgotten, the anxiety of your stalled career, the ache of deeply delayed promises, and place them directly into the scarred, capable hands of Jesus. Let Him softly and permanently dismantle the vicious lie that your personal worth or your spiritual momentum is somehow attached to your visible, outward success. Let this beautiful, eternal truth settle deep into your aching bones tonight, calming the dark, turbulent waters of your anxious mind. Your current, frustrating lack of visibility in the eyes of the world absolutely does not equal a lack of immense, breathtaking value in the eyes of heaven. You are not forgotten, you are not overlooked, and you have absolutely not been discarded upon a dusty, ignored shelf by your magnificent Creator. When God wants to do His absolute deepest, most transformative, and most foundational work in a human soul, He intentionally removes them from the crowded, noisy stage. He brings them gently into the silent, unglamorous, hidden dark, where no one else can interfere with the delicate surgery He is performing on their character. You are hidden right now precisely because you are so fiercely, jealously loved, and because the intricate work He is doing inside your spirit is far too precious for the world to prematurely witness. I invite you to think of this long, deeply quiet season at home as a beautifully orchestrated, divine incubator. It is a deliberate, highly intentional holy pause, authored by an incredibly loving Father who can clearly see the entire sprawling map of your earthly life. He knows exactly what the coming years will demand of your spirit, your mind, and your physical body. He is actively and aggressively shielding you right now from premature battles, withholding you from violent, destructive storms that your current spiritual strength was simply not meant to weather just yet. This pause is absolutely not a punishment for anything you have done wrong, but rather a breathtaking act of absolute grace. He is holding you back so that you do not step into a massive, heavy purpose before your roots are driven deep enough to carry its glorious, crushing weight. Rest completely in the brilliant, absolute genius of His timing, trusting that His gentle delays are always perfectly, flawlessly designed for your ultimate deliverance and your ultimate victory. Allow your muscles to relax even deeper, sinking heavily into the forgiving mattress as you fully accept this profound, divine permission to simply stop striving. Feel your tired legs grow incredibly heavy and warm, finally letting go of the phantom, exhausting need to run, to climb, or to frantically catch up with anyone else. Let your arms rest softly and heavily at your sides, entirely releasing the exhausting, impossible need to build, to deeply manage, or to rigidly control the chaotic circumstances spinning around you. Give your whole weary being the sacred, holy permission to simply exist right here in this quiet, uninterrupted pause. You are required to do absolutely nothing tonight, but rest safely in the thick, comforting, overwhelming presence of God Almighty. You are exactly where you are supposed to be right now, perfectly held, perfectly protected and perfectly centered in his magnificent, sovereign will. Now, as your physical body sinks deeply into a state of total, unbroken, wonderful physical peace, allow the harsh, sharp elements of the modern world to begin fading away from your mind. The relentless artificial glow of screens, the incessant buzzing of endless notifications, and the strict, suffocating demands of your calendar are dissolving right in front of your heavily closed eyes. Watch as the heavy, overwhelming pressure of tomorrow simply melts into a soft, cool, shimmering silver mist that begins to roll gently across the floor of your darkened bedroom. This peaceful, soothing mist rises slowly, washing completely over the walls, beautifully blurring the sharp edges of your furniture and completely quieting the subtle, vibrating hum of electricity. The fast-paced modern world, with all its incredibly loud expectations and frantic, stress-inducing deadlines, is entirely fading to white. It is leaving you completely, wonderfully suspended in perfect, absolute, and deeply healing quiet. As the shimmering silver mist swirls gracefully and slowly around you in the dark, it begins to carry your resting, peaceful mind gently backward through the long, echoing corridors of time. You are drifting completely effortlessly away from this noisy century, moving far, far away from the concrete cities, the loud highways, and everything familiar and rushed. Time is rewinding softly, flowing beautifully backwards past hundreds of generations, past fallen ancient empires, sinking deep into the quiet, untouched, deeply silent dawn of biblical history. The air around you begins to noticeably and wonderfully change, entirely losing the sterile, stale scent of the indoors and taking on the rich, deeply earthy fragrance of warm, sun-baked soil. You are floating safely and gently through the centuries, deeply and entirely enveloped in the protective, guiding spirit of God. You are finally arriving in an ancient era where the world was unimaginably still, remarkably unhurried, and beautifully, profoundly slow. The cool silver mist finally begins to clear, and your relaxed senses are met with the soft, dry, papery rustle of ancient olive leaves being carried gently on a cool, calming night breeze. There is a beautiful, faint, sweet aroma of crushed wild thyme, dry desert brush, and rugged, aromatic cedarwood lingering in the crisp, incredibly pure night air. You can literally feel the gentle, soothing chill of the Middle Eastern evening brushing softly against your skin. It is a deeply comforting, refreshing coolness that tells your weary body the scorching, exhausting, and demanding heat of the day is finally and completely gone. The solid ground beneath this mental vision is remarkably rugged, wonderfully dusty, and beautifully wild, completely untouched by the noise of modern civilization or the hurried, frantic rush of anxious men. You are standing as a completely silent, peaceful, entirely unseen observer in the vast, ancient, sweeping, and rolling hills of the beautiful Judean wilderness. Look slowly up at the magnificent, breathtaking ancient sky, utterly unpolluted by any harsh city lights, revealing a staggering, star-swept canopy that stretches infinitely in every possible direction. The brilliant Milky Way paints a glowing, breathtaking brushstroke of crushed diamond dust entirely across the pitch-black, heavy velvet of the glorious nighttime heavens. In this vast, open expanse of ancient wilderness, there is a profound, almost beautifully echoing emptiness that makes a human being feel terribly small, yet so deeply, wonderfully safe. The majestic landscape is distinctly defined by long, sweeping, dark shadows and towering, craggy limestone rocks. It is an endless, silent, rolling ocean of complete, absolute isolation, hidden so far away from the busy, crowded, noisy streets of nearby Bethlehem. It is a sacred place where absolutely nothing happens quickly, and where the silence is so thick and so deeply profound, you can almost clearly hear the ancient stars shifting gently in the night sky. And there, nestled very quietly in the deep, dark shadows of a rocky outcropping, you suddenly see the soft, flickering, warm orange glow of a solitary, quietly dying campfire. Sitting completely alone beside the crackling, warm flames is a young, deeply thoughtful shepherd boy, covered in the fine, dry dust of the lonely fields. He is wrapped tightly against the cool night air in a simple, heavy, coarse woolen tunic, gently holding a wooden harp in his rough hands. He is miles away from his family, deeply and totally isolated from the world, kept far behind in the lonely pastures while his older, taller, stronger brothers advance to grand military camps and royal feasts. In the soft, dancing glow of the firelight, you can sense in his young, quiet spirit the exact same familiar ache of profound isolation, the same heavy weighting that you have carried in your own heart all day. This is young David, sitting completely alone in his own profound, painful holy pause, perfectly hidden and meticulously prepared by the invisible hand of God in the vast, lonely wilderness of preparation. The cool, shimmering silver mist of your deep relaxation gently clears, slowly revealing the vast, sweeping, and beautifully rugged landscape of the ancient Judean wilderness. You are standing as a completely silent, unseen observer in a magnificent echoing valley filled with jagged limestone crags and endless rolling hills of dry, golden brush. The earthy, incredibly grounding scent of warm dust, crushed wild sage, and ancient olive trees fills the deeply quiet evening air, instantly settling your own breathing into a profoundly slow, ancient rhythm. And right there, nestled quietly in the deep, stretching shadows of a massive rock, sits a young, solitary shepherd boy covered entirely in the fine, pale dust of the lonely fields. He is completely surrounded by a sprawling, softly bleating flock of white sheep, looking incredibly small against the massive, overwhelming, and indifferent backdrop of the desert canyon. This young boy is David, the deeply forgotten eighth son of a proud, highly respected family in the busy, bustling town of Bethlehem that lies miles and miles away over the rocky ridge. Back in the crowded city, his tall, broad-shouldered, incredibly handsome older brothers are actively building their impressive lives, standing proudly in prestigious military camps and sitting at joyous, crowded banquet tables. But David has been deliberately left behind in the dirt, entirely separated from the vibrant, exciting momentum of his generation, assigned strictly to the absolute lowliest, most repetitive task a family could possibly offer: the heavy, quiet ache of being so completely overlooked by his own father is a silent, throbbing wound in his young heart. A deeply familiar pain that beautifully mirrors your own quiet frustration of feeling totally left behind. He is entirely unseen, a seemingly insignificant afterthought, carefully tucked away in the back pastures of nowhere, quietly wondering if his entire life will be permanently confined to this lonely, stagnant plot of earth. The passage of ancient time in this deeply hidden wilderness is excruciatingly, beautifully slow, stretching out like a vast, completely unchanging desert horizon. Days blend seamlessly into weeks, and weeks bleed quietly into long, lonely years, marked only by the painfully repetitive rhythm of leading the stubborn flock to sparse green patches and finding slowly trickling, still waters. From the pale, golden break of dawn until the deep purple shadows of dusk, David sits in the exact same quiet pastures, watching the blazing sun slowly inch its way across an impossibly blue, unyielding sky. There is absolutely no constant entertainment, no rapid advancement, and no visible progress to validate his young, eager life, just an agonizing lack of forward momentum that makes a human soul feel terribly trapped. To the naked human eye, this is the very definition of an entirely stalled life, a completely purposeless wandering in circles through a dry, empty landscape that offers absolutely no visible reward or escape. In this vast, echoing emptiness, surrounded only by the incredibly slow, aimless wandering of sheep, it would be so incredibly easy for a young, passionate heart to grow deeply bitter and utterly cynical. The dark, creeping shadows of the wilderness constantly whisper destructive, isolating lies, aggressively telling him that he has been entirely abandoned, that he is a terrible failure, and that God has completely forgotten his name. The profound human temptation is to throw a rough stone in sudden anger, to abandon the helpless flock entirely, and to forcefully march into the city to aggressively demand the recognition and the timeline he feels he deeply deserves. He could easily spend his endless, terribly lonely hours angrily pacing the dusty hills, totally consumed by the toxic, burning jealousy of watching his older brothers effortlessly advance in the world while he sits perfectly still, He could so easily let the quiet, heavy, invisible walls of his outdoor confinement turn into a dark, suffocating psychological prison of despair and deeply rooted, painful victimhood. But instead of entirely surrendering his weary soul to the crushing weight of his obscurity, the lonely shepherd boy makes a quiet, radically beautiful choice in the fading, soft twilight. He reaches out with his rough, calloused fingers and carefully picks up a simple, handcrafted wooden harp, gently resting the smooth, warm instrument against his young, beating chest. He chooses to intentionally transform his painful, deep isolation into a fiercely intimate, profoundly sacred sanctuary of worship, pouring all of his profound loneliness directly into the vibrating, tense strings. As he plucks the very first pure, beautifully echoing notes into the vast, absolute silence of the canyon, he completely surrenders his deep human desire to be seen by men, choosing instead to play solely for an audience of one. In the dusty, entirely forgotten margins of the world, he beautifully embraces the hiddenness, allowing the quiet, heavy pasture to gently become his private, glorious meeting place with the living, breathing God. Yet, this remote, incredibly beautiful wilderness is not merely a place of quiet, passive waiting. It is a profound, terrifying crucible deliberately designed by heaven to forge an unbreakable, iron spiritual strength. As the ancient night slowly deepens, and the heavy, thick blue darkness completely swallows the surrounding hills, a sudden, primal, heavily weighted tension abruptly changes the atmosphere of the peaceful pasture. The soft, rhythmic bleating of the resting flock turns instantly into a frantic, panicked stirring, and the cool night air grows immediately thick with a silent, heavy, creeping dread. The profound isolation of being perfectly alone suddenly shifts from a feeling of lonely boredom to a chilling, heart-stopping reality of intense, mortal vulnerability in the absolute dead of night. Out in the deepest, blackest shadows, far beyond the comforting, protective, warm orange glow of his small campfire, the golden, predatory eyes of a massive lion are watching, waiting to violently strike at the weak. Out of the heavy, tangled desert brush, the massive, terrifying silhouette of the predator suddenly lunges violently into the clearing, aiming its lethal, crushing jaws directly at the helpless, defenseless sheep. This is the ultimate, incredibly terrifying crisis of the hidden years, brilliantly and perfectly mirroring the sudden, overwhelming mental and spiritual battles that viciously attack us when we are isolated in our own quiet homes. The fierce, tearing claws of anxiety, the roaring, heavy jaw of sudden panic, and the deeply suffocating weight of fear often choose the absolute loneliest, quietest hours of the night to make their devastating, silent approach. They lunge forcefully in the dark, threatening to completely devour your fragile peace, actively attempting to utterly destroy the quiet spiritual momentum you have silently fought so incredibly hard to maintain. And out here in the vast wilderness, just like in the deep quiet of your bedroom, there are absolutely no physical walls to hide behind, no armed guards to call upon, and no loud alarms to summon the urgent help of the outside world. In that terrifying, breathless, totally agonizing moment, the dusty young shepherd boy comes face to face with the deeply chilling realization that absolutely no one is coming to save him. If he screams out for his earthly father, the cold desert wind will simply snatch the terrified sound and carry it far away into the empty canyons, entirely unheard by the deeply sleeping town. He is completely, totally, and utterly cut off from all human applause, completely stripped of any human backup, and utterly devoid of any earthly safety net that could possibly rescue him from the jaws of the beast. He is violently forced into a state of radical, desperate, and magnificent reliance on the supernatural, incredibly raw, unseen strength of the God who easily commands the sprawling universe. He cannot borrow his father's ancient faith, and he cannot rely on his brother's polished military armor. He must reach deeply into the dark void and actively pull down the raw, staggering power of the Almighty for himself. With absolutely no one around to impress and no one to document his incredible, sudden bravery, David violently rises from the dirt, entirely possessed by the fierce, beautifully protective spirit of the Lord. He grips his humble, heavy wooden shepherd's staff and his simple, worn leather sling, charging directly into the terrifying, roaring darkness without a single tiny trace of human hesitation. He does not fight with the polished, sophisticated, highly trained weapons of the world, but with the raw, deeply intimate, battle-tested trust he has patiently forged during countless quiet hours alone with his Creator. He grabs the massive, deadly beast tightly by its coarse, thick mane, violently striking it down with a superhuman, absolutely divine force that miraculously surges through his young, completely inexperienced frame. He defends the completely helpless, wandering flock with a fierce, jealous, beautiful love that perfectly and incredibly mirrors the exact same way his heavenly Father fiercely defends and intensely loves him. When the heavy, ancient dust finally settles into the dirt, and the immediate, chaotic, terrifying danger has completely and utterly passed, the profound, staggering truth of the deep wilderness softly reveals itself. There is absolutely no grand parade for his incredible, miraculous victory, no shiny silver medal pinned proudly to his chest, and no wildly cheering crowd to celebrate his breathtaking, death-defying courage. He simply and quietly wipes the dirt and sweat from his face, softly calms the terribly frightened, violently shivering sheep, and quietly returns to his seat by the softly glowing, dying embers of the solitary fire. It is the magnificent, absolutely silent revelation that his absolute greatest, most life-altering, and most completely foundational victories are won in absolute, perfect, crushing secrecy. The incredibly slow, hidden years are profoundly proving that God uses our loneliest, most entirely invisible seasons to silently forge a superhuman, unshakable courage that a loud, highly visible public stage could simply never, ever build. Breathing deeply and heavily in the cool, crisp, utterly silent night air, his racing heart rate slowly and wonderfully returning to a calm, steady, incredibly peaceful rhythm, David reaches once again for his wooden harp. Under the massive, glowing, deeply breathtaking canopy of the Milky Way, his rough, callous, dirt-stained fingers beautifully resume their gentle, remarkably rhythmic plucking, filling the vast, silent canyon with a brand new, magnificent song. The intense, burning adrenaline of the terrifying battle slowly melts entirely away, beautifully replaced by a profound rushing river of pure, divine inspiration that flows directly from the throne of heaven into his deeply resting soul. Here, in the absolute quiet void, completely stripped of every single earthly distraction, the deeply comforting, unimaginably ancient words of the Psalms are being breathed softly into human existence for the very first time. He is completely entering a state of deep, totally undisturbed, holy flow, effortlessly composing absolute masterpieces of worship that will completely heal broken, terribly isolated human hearts for thousands of generations to come. In the absolute, sweeping, beautifully majestic silence of his extreme confinement, young David is discovering something far, far more valuable than the fleeting, incredibly shallow approval of mortal men. He is meticulously learning the actual, slow, incredibly rhythmic heartbeat of God in a deeply profound, fiercely intimate way that he absolutely never could have grasped in the noisy, crowded, highly distracted markets of Bethlehem. The impossibly long, deeply quiet hours of tending stubborn sheep are actively teaching him the tender, incredibly patient, deeply restorative nature of the Good Shepherd who fiercely guides and heavily protects his own flock. He is intimately and personally learning exactly how God gently comforts the deeply broken, how he softly leads the weary beside still, glass-like waters, and how he miraculously restores the thoroughly exhausted, deeply depleted soul. The total, absolute silence of the vast wilderness is not a cruel punishment. It is the highly exclusive, elite, incredibly divine classroom where the greatest king in human history is receiving his deepest, most utterly critical education. The Lord is meticulously, beautifully, and intensely using this agonizingly slow, entirely hidden, completely solitary season to softly pour liquid iron directly into the foundation of David's young, forming character. He intimately knows that one day, This deeply forgotten boy will securely hold the heavy, incredibly intoxicating, and deeply dangerous power of a massive earthly kingdom perfectly in his hands. If David does not intimately learn absolute humility, total, unbroken reliance, and deep, profound spiritual endurance right here in the quiet dirt, the incredibly heavy, solid gold crown of Israel will completely and utterly destroy him. The unimaginably long, deeply frustrating delay in his timeline is actually God's ultimate, most profound act of deeply protective grace, carefully ensuring that his internal, spiritual character can fully support the massive external calling that is rapidly approaching. The quiet, invisible, deeply hidden years are actively, aggressively, and beautifully solidifying his mind and spirit, carefully ensuring that when he finally steps onto the grand public stage, he will absolutely not be crushed by its overwhelming weight. It is a deeply breathtaking, completely magnificent contrast to suddenly realize exactly what is happening in the glowing, invisible, eternal spiritual realm while the physical human world completely and utterly ignores him. His earthly family has entirely forgotten to even invite him to the most incredibly important, deeply historic, life-altering sacrifice in their town, perfectly content to leave him entirely trapped in the endless, deeply boring pastures. To the naked human eye, he is a deeply insignificant, perpetually stalled boy going absolutely nowhere, entirely and completely left behind by the rapid, exciting pace of modern society. But the piercing, blazing, overwhelmingly beautiful gaze of heaven has completely bypassed the impressive, shining armor of his older brothers and zeroed in entirely on the hidden, softly beating heart of the lonely shepherd. The grand, incredibly dramatic, unfolding narrative of human redemption is not quietly waiting in the loud, proud halls of political power. It is completely, utterly, and entirely focused on the lonely kid singing softly in the dark. The magnificent, incredibly brilliant creator of the universe, the God who effortlessly and easily numbers the trillions of burning, beautiful stars spinning slowly above the canyon, has absolutely never, not even for a tiny fraction of a second, taken his unblinking eyes off that lonely patch of wilderness. Every single tear David shed in deep frustration, every deeply quiet prayer he desperately whispered into the dry desert wind, and every single lonely, bloody victory he won in the dark was perfectly, meticulously recorded in the glowing courts of heaven. God was actively watching him, fiercely and deeply loving him, and beautifully celebrating the incredibly quiet, obedient posture of his heavily hidden, deeply faithful heart. He was absolutely not forgotten, he was definitely not delayed, and he was absolutely not permanently trapped. He was perfectly positioned, flawlessly timed, and entirely engulfed in the massive, invisible favor of the Almighty. The divine incubator was flawlessly, perfectly, and miraculously working its quiet magic, and the deeply quiet, dusty shepherd boy was just moments away from the explosive, destiny-altering revelation of his true, completely anointed calling. As the ancient, dusty air of the Judean wilderness begins to gently settle in your mind, allow the profound truth of that lonely shepherd boy to carefully bridge the vast gap of time. The heavy, agonizing frustration of your deeply isolated season, the dull ache of staring at the exact same four walls, is completely and intimately understood by the God who actively designed the wilderness. He sees exactly how fiercely you have wrestled with the incredibly painful feeling of being perfectly stuck, beautifully mirroring the boy who desperately wondered if his life was permanently placed on hold. You have spent countless, deeply exhausting hours quietly punishing yourself for not moving faster, secretly wondering if your deep isolation is a painful result of some terrible failure. But the Lord wants to reach deeply into the very center of your weary heart tonight and permanently, softly remove all the lingering guilt you feel about your current lack of momentum. The deeply profound miracle of the hidden years is that God deliberately and wonderfully hides his most precious, highly valued instruments in the quiet dark long before he ever allows them to be displayed. Think about a master craftsman who carefully takes the most exquisite piece of raw wood and quietly carries it far away from the loud, distracting noise of the busy marketplace. He brings it deep into the quiet solitude of his private, heavily shadowed workshop because he intimately knows that the delicate, highly intricate work of carving and tuning requires absolute, unbroken silence. Your deeply frustrating season at home is not a mistake. It is not a terrible oversight, and it is absolutely not a harsh punishment for anything you have failed to do. It is the fiercely protected private workshop of the master, where he has intentionally closed the heavy door on the outside world so he can carefully tune the delicate strings of your tired soul. I passionately invite you tonight to beautifully reframe your perceived, painful confinement into a highly active, aggressively brilliant divine incubator. To the incredibly limited, desperately rushed eye of the modern world, your current life simply looks like a perfectly still, completely stagnant room where absolutely nothing of any visible value is happening. But right beneath the quiet surface, entirely shielded from the incredibly harsh, damaging elements of the outside environment, there is a massive, miraculous explosion of invisible, life-altering growth occurring. Inside a physical incubator, there is absolutely no frantic running, no visible climbing, and absolutely no impressive public performance. There is only deep, miraculous development in the warm, completely protected dark. You are not falling permanently behind the rushing world. You are being completely reconstructed from the inside out, beautifully prepared to sustain a calling that will require profound, supernatural endurance. The Holy Spirit is right now, in this very quiet room, actively working deep within the unseen layers of your conscious mind, aggressively fortifying your emotional boundaries and expanding your spiritual capacity. He is deliberately and fiercely driving your root system incredibly deep into the solid bedrock of his perfect peace, ensuring they can brilliantly support the massive weight of the destiny that awaits you. If God carelessly allowed you to shoot up quickly into the bright visible light right now, the incredibly fierce, violent storms of your coming battles would quickly and utterly uproot you. He is keeping you safely at home right now to deliberately fortify your spirit, perfectly ensuring that your inner character can successfully hold the staggering, glorious weight of your future blessings. More true, totally foundational. Destiny-altering transformation is happening inside your incredibly quiet, resting body right now than in any deeply frantic, heavily rushed season of your entire past. As you rest your deeply weary body heavily against the soft, forgiving mattress, quietly and firmly, give yourself the absolute, divine permission to stop fighting the brilliant, protective boundaries of this incubator. Stop aggressively pounding your bruised, tired spiritual fists against the closed, locked doors that God has actively and intentionally sealed shut for your absolute, ultimate good. Instead of terribly wasting your incredibly precious, completely depleted energy, quietly mourning the worldly momentum you incorrectly feel you have lost, entirely surrender to the deeply transformative work of the pause. Let the profound, absolute stillness wash entirely over you, beautifully sinking deeply into the wonderful realization that your total lack of visible progress is secretly allowing God to build an eternal fortress inside your chest. Rest deeply, beautifully, and completely in the staggering knowledge that the God who perfectly spun the galaxies into motion is fiercely using this heavy silence to make you an absolute masterpiece. There is a deeply famous, incredibly powerful moment in David's later life when he bravely volunteers to fight the massive, terrifying giant Goliath. Stepping out of the deep shadows for the very first time, the frantic, desperately panicked King Saul immediately attempts to forcefully dress the young shepherd in his own royal, highly polished, incredibly heavy, clunky bronze armor. Saul completely and deeply insists that if David is going to actually succeed, he absolutely must conform, heavily wearing the exact same protective layers and following the exact same established path as everyone else. But the deeply wise, incredibly tested shepherd boy takes one slow, awkward, deeply restrictive step and immediately realizes that the massive, heavy armor of other people's expectations will completely and utterly crush him. He absolutely refuses to wear what was never uniquely designed for him, wonderfully choosing to completely cast off the heavy, suffocating metal and step into the terrifying battle exactly as God had designed him. I want to gently invite you right now to actively and completely unbuckle the heavy, crushing, incredibly suffocating spiritual and mental armor of other people's demanding expectations. You have spent far too many exhausted years trying to violently force your completely unique, perfectly designed life to deeply match the rigid, highly aggressive, incredibly loud timeline of the modern world. You have heavily carried the deep, throbbing guilt of not advancing quickly enough, the cold anxiety of feeling completely stalled, and the jagged pressure to perfectly perform for an audience that doesn't truly know you. Imagine quietly and deliberately taking off the heavy, solid brass helmet of society's opinions and unstrapping the thick, crushing iron breastplate of comparing your deeply hidden season to someone else's visible harvest. Feel the incredibly massive, staggering physical relief as you let those heavy, totally useless weights completely crash to the floor, instantly allowing your terribly tired chest to beautifully, deeply expand and finally breathe. With the incredibly crushing weight of the world's false armor completely removed, gently and beautifully turn your peaceful attention back to the simple, deeply quiet tools that God has placed right inside your home. When David boldly walked down into the valley to face the terrifying giant, he did not carry a massive, polished sword or a brilliantly sharpened spear. He simply knelt down by a quiet, heavily overlooked creek bed and carefully selected 5 small, incredibly smooth, entirely ordinary stones from the softly rushing water. To the heavily armored, loudly mocking giant, and to the terrified, deeply cynical armies of Israel watching from the ridge, those tiny insignificant rocks looked like an absolute laughable joke. But David intimately knew that God's overwhelming, breathtaking, supernatural power effortlessly flows through the small, the ordinary, and the seemingly insignificant elements that the proud world completely throws away. Your beautifully smooth stones are the incredibly small, totally unglamorous, deeply hidden daily disciplines you are quietly practicing right now in the absolute silence of your isolated season. It is the quiet, highly faithful habit of waking up and whispering a deeply tired prayer when you feel like giving up, and the incredibly gentle act of choosing gratitude when anxiety violently attacks. It is the deeply simple, wildly profound choice to simply trust God's invisible hand when absolutely nothing in your physical surroundings makes any logical sense. These incredibly ordinary, seemingly pointless days at home are actually the clear, rushing waters of the brook, beautifully and steadily wearing down the rough edges of your character to make you perfectly smooth. God is aggressively, fiercely, and perfectly blessing your incredibly small acts of quiet faithfulness, actively turning your incredibly boring routine into a perfectly polished, highly lethal weapon against the darkness. Right now, deeply in the dark, wonderfully quiet safety of this absolutely peaceful room, make a profound, highly intentional, purely psychological release of your heavily burdened, totally delayed timeline. Visualize your highly detailed personal calendar, your desperately held ambitions, and your incredibly frantic, cold fear of falling completely behind as heavy, jagged rocks clenched tightly in your tired, aching fists. Slowly, beautifully, and gently open your heavily clenched hands and intentionally place every single one of those incredibly jagged rocks directly into the deeply scarred, infinitely massive, capable hands of Jesus. Allow him to gently, perfectly, and wonderfully lift the entire completely crushing burden of managing the unpredictable future straight off your terribly exhausted, entirely drooping shoulders. You do not have to fiercely engineer your own grand escape from this deeply hidden season, because the exact same God who perfectly locked you in the incubator holds the exact beautiful key to let you out. When the absolute, completely perfect fullness of ancient divine time finally arrived in the vast dusty wilderness, the incredible prophet Samuel was aggressively dispatched straight to the overlooked town of Bethlehem. God had explicitly commanded him to finally anoint the next great, historic king of Israel, an event that would completely alter the entire massive trajectory of human history. The deeply proud father paraded all of David's tall, highly impressive, intensely eager older brothers before the prophet, fully expecting the obvious, highly visible candidates to be immediately chosen for the throne. But God incredibly and decisively rejected every single one of them, absolutely refusing to allow the grand, highly anticipated ceremony to proceed until the forgotten boy was violently called in from the isolated fields. Samuel aggressively refused to even sit down or eat until the deeply hidden, terribly overlooked shepherd boy was immediately, forcefully brought in from the deep, horribly lonely obscurity of the dark. Please completely and deeply understand this absolute eternal truth tonight as you sink heavier and deeper into your profoundly resting, peaceful state. When your highly purposeful, deeply hidden season of intense preparation is finally and completely finished, God absolutely knows your exact, highly specific address. He knows exactly what beautifully quiet room you are resting in right now. He perfectly sees the exact bed you are heavily lying on, and he absolutely will not allow you to be hidden one single second longer than is perfectly necessary. You absolutely do not have to scream for attention. You do not have to aggressively kick down heavy wooden doors. And you do not have to frantically manipulate your circumstances to be seen by the right people. When it is finally your perfect time to wildly step out of the shadows, the entire, incredibly massive weight of heaven will actively move to pull you directly into your beautiful destiny, and absolutely nothing can stop it. Until that deeply spectacular, totally appointed moment beautifully arrives, gracefully allow a profound, deeply hypnotic sense of royal dignity to beautifully wash entirely over your tired, perfectly resting body. The rapidly advancing world may entirely dismiss your incredibly quiet, deeply uncelebrated endurance in this highly isolated season as a total, pathetic waste of your highly valuable time. But your beautiful, deeply painful willingness to simply survive the quiet days at home is actively being loudly celebrated right now in the glowing, majestic, deeply echoing courts of heaven. The angels are watching your incredibly quiet, seemingly invisible faithfulness, beautifully recognizing the massive, incredibly profound spiritual fortitude you are heavily building entirely in the dark. You are deeply, intensely earning your highly valuable spiritual stripes in absolute secret, quietly building an incredibly massive resilience that will perfectly define the entirely victorious trajectory of your future. Let the freezing cold, terribly painful ache of feeling left entirely behind perfectly and wonderfully wash away right now, beautifully carried off by the deep, steady rhythm of your relaxed breathing. I want you to actively, consciously replace that incredibly toxic, isolating feeling with the incredibly warm, deeply radiant, totally glowing sensation of being entirely and wonderfully set apart. You are fiercely, incredibly exclusively chosen by the absolute creator of the entire universe for this deeply specific, intensely intimate, wonderfully quiet moment in time. He has intentionally drawn a beautiful, highly protective, heavily guarded boundary directly around your quiet home, keeping you completely contained within the massive, incredible warmth of his fiercely jealous love. You are absolutely not trapped, you are not forgotten, and you are not missing out on your incredibly short life. You are beautifully resting right in the exact perfect center of his sovereign will. As your perfectly relaxed, wonderfully heavy body sinks even deeper into the soft, comforting layers of your warm bed, feel the profound, deeply calming assurance of his unblinking eye resting softly upon you. Every single deeply quiet tear you have shed in frustration, every heavily exhausted sigh you have breathed in the dark, has been meticulously, beautifully collected, and perfectly held by your loving king. The incredibly beautiful, profoundly massive calling that is waiting for you out there in the bright sunlight is absolutely, entirely safe, completely untouched by any worldly delay or human interference. You have absolute, completely divine permission to entirely let go of tomorrow, completely releasing the heavy, highly complicated burden of your future into the incredibly capable hands that perfectly formed you. Surrender completely and wonderfully now to this beautifully heavy, profoundly deep, divinely anointed peace, knowing with absolute certainty that your beautiful hidden season is the ultimate masterpiece of God's perfect grace. The deep, comforting silence of the night is settling over you now. The dark shadows in your quiet room are softly fading into a perfect, heavy peace. It is completely safe to let go of the long day. Allow your heavily exhausted eyelids to gently and beautifully close. Your incredibly tired mind is safely slowing down. The Lord is entirely in control of this quiet night. You are safely guided by the Good Shepherd. He intimately knows your exact name. He perfectly understands the deeply hidden ache of your tired heart. Feel the incredibly heavy, beautiful pull of complete rest. The Lord is your deeply loving, utterly perfect shepherd. You shall absolutely not want for anything tonight. Everything you could possibly need is perfectly provided in his presence. He makes you to gently lie down in lush, ancient green pastures. Imagine the incredibly soft, cool grass rising up to cradle your back. It is wonderfully thick, deeply warm, and beautifully comforting. Feel the cool earth perfectly holding your entire weight. Your heavily exhausted body is sinking slowly into the safe meadow. You absolutely do not have to hold yourself up anymore. Just perfectly, entirely, and completely let go. He softly leads your quiet spirit beside the incredibly still waters. The water is completely glassy, beautifully undisturbed, and deeply calm. There is absolutely no rushing, frantic current anywhere near you. There are no crashing waves to fear in this sacred place. The quiet stream perfectly reflects the ancient starry sky above. Let the gentle, slow rhythm of the water beautifully calm your racing mind. Match your deeply relaxed breathing to that perfectly still water. Breathe in the deep, incredibly cool peace of his presence. Exhale the very last traces of your heavy, quiet anxiety. He is perfectly restoring your thoroughly depleted soul right now. Bring your deeply relaxed attention entirely to your physical body. Notice the quiet, heavy tension entirely leaving your neck. Let your tired shoulders drop completely into the soft mattress. Feel your arms grow incredibly warm and wonderfully heavy. Your heavily resting hands are perfectly still at your sides. Release the tight, anxious grip you have held all day long. Let a profound wave of warm peace wash gently over your chest. Your heavy breathing is becoming beautifully, wonderfully deep. Every single muscle is entirely giving up the exhausting fight. You are sinking deeper and deeper into absolute physical peace. The Good Shepherd is standing fiercely right beside your bed. His heavy, incredibly solid wooden staff is firmly planted on the floor. He is perfectly, wonderfully guarding the heavy door of your room. Absolutely no creeping fear can possibly cross his divine boundary. No sudden anxiety can touch your beautifully resting mind. The dark shadows are completely emptied of all their terror. The absolute burden of your physical safety is totally on him. You do not have to watch out for yourself tonight. You are deeply, perfectly hidden safely inside his massive hand. You are entirely wrapped in his profound, unbreakable comfort. We move gently and deeply into the perfectly quiet secret place. He who dwells entirely in the secret place of the Most High. You are beautifully abiding directly under the heavy shadow of the Almighty. Visualize that deeply massive, perfectly protective shadow falling completely over you. It feels exactly like a wonderfully thick, heavily weighted blanket. It is gently pulled all the way up over your cold, tired shoulders. It totally blocks out all the painful, loud noise of tomorrow. The freezing wind of the outside world absolutely cannot reach you. You are perfectly encased in the completely beautiful silence of God. He is your incredible refuge and your completely unshakable fortress. He perfectly covers you entirely with his incredibly massive feathers. Under his deeply glowing, protective wings, you find absolute, perfect trust. His divine truth is your completely massive, beautifully unbreakable shield. You do not have to be afraid of the quiet terror by night. The total darkness holds absolutely no power in this deeply holy room. The incredible silence here is totally sacred and profoundly healing. You are completely swallowed up in his warm, fiercely jealous love. Nothing from the rushing modern world exists here in the dark. Only the thick, heavily comforting, incredibly beautiful presence of Jesus. You are entirely safe to sink completely into the deep slumber. Your quiet, resting heartbeat is beautifully and wonderfully slowing down. It is perfectly matching the ancient, incredibly steady rhythm of peace. Every incredibly slow inhale brings pure, thick rest directly into your heart. Every completely surrendered exhale pushes the tension far out into the dark. You are matching the totally ancient, completely unhurried rhythm of God. The quiet pauses between your soft breaths are growing beautifully long. The incredible, massive weight of gravity is softly pulling you down. There is absolutely no resistance left in your heavily resting body. You are beautifully floating perfectly in the completely calm, totally silent deep, just wonderfully, deeply, and entirely sinking completely down. Let that thick, incredibly warm wave of relaxation travel down your legs. Feel your tired thighs melt completely heavily into the soft bed. Feel your resting calves grow incredibly warm and totally, utterly still. Let your completely exhausted feet totally relax, entirely surrendering their grip. You have absolutely nowhere left to walk right now. You have entirely nowhere you are required to desperately be. The terribly frantic race of the heavy world is completely over. The divine incubator is holding you so perfectly, so incredibly gently. You are completely anchored in the absolutely perfect peace of Christ. Let go totally, entirely, and completely right now. I quietly whisper these absolute truths deeply into your resting soul. You are perfectly hidden. You are deeply, infinitely loved. Your completely quiet preparation right now is entirely and totally sacred. You are absolutely not forgotten. You are wonderfully and completely seen by the Father. Your highly unique life is perfectly and flawlessly on time. God is entirely pleased with your beautiful, quiet waiting. He is softly smiling over you right now as you deeply sleep. Let that wonderful truth settle perfectly into your incredibly tired mind. The lonely, warm campfire in the vast ancient wilderness is entirely fading. The last glowing, deeply warm red embers are softly turning to ash. The long, deeply exhausting day is completely and totally finished. The beautifully heavy work of your quiet survival is perfectly done. The entirely forgotten shepherd is deeply asleep in the quiet dirt. He is wonderfully resting completely in God's entirely perfect plan, and so are you, resting perfectly in your beautifully safe bed. The incredibly vast, sweeping canyon is dissolving into the soft dark. The beautifully ancient world is completely disappearing into total peaceful silence. You are perfectly held in the absolute center of His magnificent will. I give you total, completely divine permission to stop everything right now. You have absolutely perfect permission to wonderfully close your heavy eyes. Lay down every single impossibly heavy burden you are quietly carrying. Drop the highly complicated weight of your entirely unknown, unpredictable tomorrow. God is entirely holding your tomorrow totally securely in His massive hands. You do not need to fiercely figure out tomorrow tonight. Drop the completely exhausting questions. Drop the terribly cold, entirely deeply rooted fears. You are commanded absolutely only to beautifully, completely, and deeply rest. Let the profound, incredibly massive ocean of slumber carry you entirely away. Feel the absolute, completely final wave of deep relaxation totally cover your face. Your heavy, tired forehead is incredibly perfectly and completely smooth. Your completely exhausted, heavy eyes are sinking beautifully, deeply backward. Let your tight jaw relax entirely, completely falling softly and wonderfully open. Your deeply heavy, entirely limp body is totally, wonderfully asleep. Your quiet spirit is entirely, completely resting perfectly in His heavy grace. I actively and totally place your entire future directly into His perfectly capable hands. You are incredibly, entirely free to do absolutely nothing right now. Drift completely and wonderfully deeper into the beautifully dark, utterly silent deep. Go softly to sleep directly in the warm, incredibly heavy arms of the Father. Sleep completely, absolutely, and wonderfully perfectly in absolute peace. Sleep deeply, totally, without a single, tiny, lingering trace of fear. Sleep entirely, completely, flawlessly in His highly jealous, absolute, pure love. You are entirely safe. You are perfectly hidden. You are entirely swallowed up in the massive, sweeping ocean of His peace. You are profoundly and totally ready for deep, beautifully thick, holy rest. There is absolutely totally nothing left anywhere in the world to say. There is entirely perfectly nothing left anywhere in the world to do. Let the complete, deeply thick, totally sweeping silence entirely take over. Let the deep, profound, totally beautiful, eternal healing wonderfully quietly begin. You are completely hidden entirely in Christ. Drift softly down entirely into the very bottom of the deep black quiet. Drift completely, wonderfully away from the totally conscious, completely loud waking world. Sleep entirely now, totally enveloped beautifully in his absolutely magnificent grace. Sleep deeply, entirely flawlessly hidden deep in the warm palm of his mighty hand. Let the beautifully deep, incredibly profound stillness simply pull you completely under. The deeply good shepherd is perfectly watching over your quiet breathing. Surrender completely and totally into the pure, absolutely unbroken silence. Just deeply, peacefully, and entirely perfectly sleep. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety.